Okay, well, this is an ongoing research project that I have been doing, and what we are trying to do is really find out what is the innovation process in all recent industrialization in Mexico. I have to say that we chose the auto industry because mainly is the main manufacturing of Mexico, so it's where most of foreign direct investment has been happening, and so what I will try to do is show you what's the key question, no? And the learning process in local producers, FDI in the automobile industry and local producers, the research methodology, identification of learning and innovation, and what are the lessons learned from this. What would be the key question here? Transnational corporation operation is based on their own technology. Then they go to suppliers, networks use transnational corporations technology. Suppliers get into the learning process, assuming that transnational corporations act as teachers, and then suppliers innovate, and transnational corporations allow suppliers to patent their innovations. That is the assumption. What we will see is that there's not a unique pattern of things happening. There are different paths that has happened through time. Transnational corporations have been an important means through which local producers can access to new technologies and knowledge management. A strong business linkages between transnational corporation and local producers can generate a relationship of trust, alliance, cooperation, technical knowledge, and skills. That type of thing, in the think of trust and alliance and cooperation and skills, what we have seen in Mexico mainly is that some transnational corporations, initially they begin operations in the country, and after a while they decide if they put a design center or not design center in Mexico. And that's what we call this, the trust and alliance. If we find that there's a design center in Mexico, then what we say is that there's a cooperation and development of skills for the local companies. A potentially important source of competitive advantage is the capacity of their foreign subsidiaries to generate innovations based on stimuli and resources and control in the heterogeneous host country environments. In this sense, FDI may also be interpreted as a mechanism through which firms seek to develop new sources and capacities on a global basis. That is what Kogut and Chang says, Gis and Wesley in the literature. What are the negative effects of FDI? Transnational corporations don't do research in their affiliates, only in their headquarters. The transnational corporation become an enclave with few local linkages and spillovers. It inhibits the priority of technological policy for the host country. This is the case where, and this was the first phase in Mexico, they were only putting capital into the country, but they were not doing any type of research. The positive things happened just very recently. When is that happened in Mexico? That happened after NAFTA. NAFTA opened really a new era of collaboration between foreign direct investment and Mexican local companies. What does NAFTA did? What you have to figure out is that now we are in a process of cooperation because integration between United States and Mexico plants. Most of the car industry is being transferred to Mexico, and in that terms now, establishment of strong links with local businesses is taking place in the country. and upstream and downstream linkages among local companies, enabling technology transfer and improvement of job skills. What we are having now is, for example, the development of new areas of engineering in the country in terms of the specific demands of foreign direct investment. We now have, in that sense, foreign direct investment conducting the new areas of specialization on education. For example, in engineering, we have all these areas of engineering, mechatronics, high tech for aerospatial, spatial industry, and all that type of things. Current trends in the participation of the global value chain favors local produce and local economies. An increased demand for knowledge, research, and more internationalized developing trends are nodes of innovation networks, innovation process in local economies. What we have here is foreign direct investment has also helped to employment to be well paid, new disciplines and products, specialization at local universities, better use of local available materials, cluster development and spin-offs by products. Although this has positive economies, property rights are kept by transnational corporations as innovation processes remain within Transnational Corporations Network, parent subsidiary innovations network. I'm going to give you an experience here. For example, Volkswagen in Mexico decided to put a design center in Mexico. The design center was developed by Mexicans, and then what they decided is that they were going to introduce new models in Mexico, the new Beetle, the new Beetle was designed in Mexico, and the Bora, and they decided that the Jetta was going to be one of the areas where that was going to disappear. And Jetta, Mexican engineers redesigned it, and they decided not to disappear the line of production of Jettas. And who make the patent? Volkswagen decided that the redesigned models and the models that were designed in Mexico were going to be the parent patents, for all the pieces of development, So that's what we found out, that although there's a lot of innovation in the auto industry by Mexican engineers, it was not possible them to make some sort of patenting of the pieces. The other case is General Motors Pontiac. They put a design center in central Mexico. The whole car was designed in Mexico, and the patents of all the procedures remains to be with General Motors. So that's the type of things that has been happening there. So if you see here, what we have is that co-invention take place. Mexican patents is very low, but there's a lot of patents application in Mexico by foreigners. So what is happening is that most of the inventions that has been taking place, resident versus non-residents, is because foreign companies have not been allowing Mexicans to really patent the things that they are developing. So that's the type of negative type of effect over the products. And here is the type of industrial property in Mexico. Industrial design, no residence is almost 2,000 versus residence that is 900. Patents, 16,000 non-residents. Patent residence, 600. And then trademarks is where Mexicans do most of the registration, and utility models, that is also Mexicans that do most of the of the registration. No? Now, we go into the FDI in the automobile industry and local producers. FDI becomes part of a more complex process when the relationship extends beyond the subsidiary structure, as suppliers' networks are developed. After NAFTA, the investment went from assembly plants to auto parts production to build the second and third tier supplier network to promote a solid hiring process in Mexico. If you see here the graph, no, what is happening, no, is that as an evolution of FDI in the auto industry, most of the new investment is not coming to plants, but for the auto parts part of the. So what they are developing is a network production in Mexico, no, and that has been quite successful, no. Most of it comes from the States, and then it comes from Japan, Canada, Germany, and France. This is how the automobile industry in Mexico has developed in the last years, no? And if you see, there are, geographically, they are mainly in the north part of Mexico, trying to develop for export to the United States. What I was telling you before, what the United States has been doing is moving most of their plants because of the low cost to Mexico, trying to get cars done in Mexico, manufactured in Mexico, and then re-export to the United States. Here is the automobile and auto part industry productivity. If you see, between 1994, since NAFTA was signed, productivity has been increasing through time at a very high rate in different parts. No? In the auto industry, if you go, if you divide them in assembling plants, no, and then trucks assembling plants, motor production, transmission parts, suspension brakes, and all that. The part of assembling has a record increase in productivity. The evolution of the automobile industry in Mexico, no, from assembly to supply to domestic market to exports, no, that is since 1994 the most of the production that is done. They are producers now. Around 2,000 firms that are in the auto parts establishments. Production statistics shows that Mexico is among the main producers of cars in the world. Now, how did we did the research methodology trying to track if they were some sort of patenting by nationals, no, in the auto parts industry. What we did is get information from National Auto Parts statistics provided by INEGI, the Mexican Institute for Intellectual Property, and WIPO statistics. Then we did also some company surveys to see exactly what was the process in where the transnational corporations were allowing people to patent their own things. The aim was to identify producers who develop innovation processes and register patents. This methodology was carried out in 3 phases. The firm surveys was provided of transnational corporations receiving some sort of technology, making innovation, and businesses patenting that. Selection of 3 major groups were obtained: GD Components de Mexico, the Ecoplast, Vistamex, and Petius. So this is a very small, very small sample that we have still. What we are doing now is trying to increase the size of the visits that we are doing. But what we were trying to do with this was identification of learning and innovation. No? first, receiving technology. The first group of enterprises have technology transferred by customers. They don't have innovation and hence no possibility of patenting. The second one, that is the innovative firm, the second group of companies receive technology transferred by their clients, have a significant degree of innovation, design and development, focusing in innovative design. However, despite the development, they don't have patent filing. And the third group is the one that have been patenting. What was the lessons learned, policy recommendations, and future perspectives? No? So when we went to the companies and for trying to look out technology learning in local businesses, no? Where they were taking, the learning process was taking place. Acquisition and use of technology, all of them were having that. Then they were able to troubleshooting individually and team, quality control systems, use of external knowledge, suppliers, customers, competitors, research and design center. And then the root of innovation was initial training in other corporations. That's the main thing that we found out. In Vistamex, acquisition of technical knowledge and technology. And then in Petus, we found out develop their engineering capacities and subcontracting suppliers in innovation. The suppliers are selected and they receive some technology transfer in molds of patterns. The transnational technology is updated and continue near a real-time basis, enabling suppliers to effectively support worldwide production, and local producers record an increase of production, sale, and hence of their productivity. The good practices are teamwork and constant training, and bad practices. Once innovation is obtained, property becomes a critical factor. Generally, innovation is appropriated by the subcontractor. Suppliers are not outsourced. The firms began to subcontract after they were really already producing their own products, so the relationship was not as restrictive as for firms established specifically to supply some sort of parts to transnational corporations. Bargaining was easier for the latter as they discussed the type of product they would be interested in supplying to the foreign company, Volvo and Irisar. Patenting was a byproduct. The main incentive was competition among suppliers rather than interest in acquiring patents. What are the recommendations that we are doing here? Policy should be oriented toward linkages and innovation. Otherwise, transnational corporations' operations will continue to be based on short-term operations. The government should discuss with transnational corporations the role it expected them to play in developing innovation. Further research is required, but the INPI database must be revised and updated. We don't have, the database doesn't allow really to do any type of econometric measure, no? In terms of what they are doing is very restrictive. Mexico has a long way to go in promoting IPR. Business don't fully recognize the usefulness of patents and how they can become an asset for their development. What will be the conclusions? Innovation and patenting seem difficult in a country dominated by transnational corporations, since FDI policies focus on attracting large quantity of FDI without paying much attention to the depth of investment. Transnational corporations usually attempt to obtain all the rights of any innovation that takes place. Thus, the innovation process among suppliers is inhibited. Interviews reveal that supplier firms established with the help of transnational corporations have more flexibility and are able to be engaged in innovation and obtain patents. The question that remains unanswered is how to make contracts between transnational corporations and supplier firms. With the appropriate contracts, innovation can also be held by supplier firms. And there's a perception that there's no enforcement of the law in Mexico. So firms feel that even if they follow the process to obtain a patent, benefits will be marginal or even non-existent. Thank you.